Harley-Davidson, over 120 years old, billions in revenue, dealerships across much of the world, an American icon so deeply embedded in the culture that presidents visit their factories for photo ops and grown men get the logo tattooed on their necks. The corporate version of how this company started is clean and simple. Two young friends in a Milwaukee shed, tinkering with engines, building the American dream one motorcycle at a time. That was 1903. By 1985, those same bikes were sitting in warehouses with oil leaking onto the floor. The company was reportedly hours away from preparing a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing, and the only reason any of it survived was because one random investment banker happened to be a Harley fan. So how does an American icon go from a wooden shed to a global empire to a bankruptcy lawyer's office and back again? The museum version of this story isn't exactly false. It's just missing half the people, half the accidents, and most of the mess. Grab a seat, this one gets messy. If you had asked anyone in Milwaukee about William Harley and Arthur Davidson back in 1901, they would have told you they were just a couple of kids who liked to tinker. They had no idea. William Sylvester Harley was born on December 29, 1880, the son of an English immigrant who worked at a bicycle factory. Arthur Davidson was born about 6 weeks later on February 11, 1881, just a few doors away. Both his parents were Scottish immigrants from a tiny town called Aberlemno. These two kids grew up together, fished together, and by their late teens they were both working at Barth Manufacturing in Milwaukee. Harley worked as a draftsman and Davidson worked as a pattern maker. The legend says they were inspired by a French motorized vehicle demonstration. That part checks out. What came next is where Harley-Davidson's official history starts cutting corners. Harley sketched his first engine design in 1901, a tiny single-cylinder motor just 116 cubic centimeters designed to bolt onto a regular pedal bicycle frame. The two friends started building it in a machine shop owned by their buddy Henry Melk. That name almost never appears in the corporate telling, but Melk had the lathe. Without him and his equipment, there is no Harley-Davidson. Period. The first prototype was a disaster. It could not climb Milwaukee's hills. The engine was too small, the frame was too weak, and the thing basically worked as a bicycle with a noisy accessory strapped to it. They rode it around the neighborhood a few times, and the consensus was brutal. This was not a motorcycle, it was a bicycle having a bad day. The boys scrapped the whole design and went back to a blank page, this time planning a much bigger engine and a purpose-built frame that could actually handle the weight and vibration of a real motor. This is the part where another forgotten name enters the story. Ole Evinrude. Yes, that Evinrude, the man who would go on to invent the outboard boat motor. In 1903, Evinrude was a Norwegian-born machinist building gasoline engines on Milwaukee's Lake Street. According to historical accounts, Evinrude had experience with French engine manufacturing and provided the duo with de Dion engine drawings that helped them design their first viable motor. He walked them through their toughest engineering problems on the bigger 24.74 cubic inches loop frame engine that would become their first real motorcycle. Was Evinrude a founder? No, he never took stock. But according to several historical accounts, his advice helped them solve early engine problems that they could not crack on their own. His name does not appear on a single motorcycle. Meanwhile, Arthur's dad, William C. Davidson, a cabinet maker, had finally gotten sick of the boys greasing up his basement. He told them to take it outside. So sometime around 1903, the Davidson family built a wooden shed in the backyard, 10 feet by 15 feet, about the size of a modern parking space. Someone painted the words, Harley-Davidson Motor Company on the door. Multiple sources say it was Arthur's aunt. By the way, the company technically should have been called Davidson Harley, since there were 3 Davidsons and only 1 Harley. The Davidson brothers reportedly gave William Harley top billing because the original engine sketch had been his, a small courtesy that became the most famous name in American motorcycle history. Here's the detail the company leaves out of the brochure. A good deal of the early machining and fabrication reportedly happened at the West Milwaukee rail shops of the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad, where Arthur's oldest brother, William A. Davidson, worked as tool room foreman. This was common for small shops at the time, borrowing tools and equipment from larger facilities. But it does complicate the story of four guys in a shed doing everything themselves. And the shed itself, the most sacred relic in American motorcycle history, was preserved at the Juneau Avenue factory for decades as a kind of shrine. Then, during the AMF era in the early 1970s, the preserved shed was reportedly demolished during factory cleanup. Gone. The company quietly stopped talking about it. Now here's a detail that sounds like it belongs in a movie. According to family lore, Arthur Davidson had stashed his startup seed money between his mattress. One day, a cleaning lady visited the Davidson house. The money vanished. Arthur, now completely broke, went to his beekeeper uncle, James McClay, who ran a honey farm on Lake Mendota in Madison, Wisconsin. McClay reportedly handed over $170, which is roughly $6,000 in today's money. The family forever called him the Honey Uncle. His bee farm was later sold to the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Today, it is part of Picnic Point on the Lakeshore Nature Preserve. One more founding detail that is too good not to mention. Arthur's middle brother, Walter Davidson, was working as a railroad machinist in Parsons, Kansas, pulling a solid wage on the Missouri-Kansas-Texas line. Arthur wrote him a letter promising him a ride on a finished motorcycle. Walter quit his job, traveled all the way north to Milwaukee, and discovered there was no finished motorcycle. There was a half-built mess in a shed. He stayed anyway, which tells you something about the Davidson family's stubbornness. Walter ended up physically assembling the first production Harley-Davidson, working his day job as a machinist and then bolting bikes together at night. Their first documented public appearance came on September 8, 1904, at a Milwaukee motorcycle race at State Fair Park. A rider named Edward Hildebrand took the bike out. He finished fourth. Not exactly a triumphant debut. They did not sell their first complete motorcycle to a paying customer until later that year, and that customer was Henry Meyer, a friend. In 1905, the entire company sold a grand total of 5 motorcycles. 3 of those went through a Chicago dealer named Carl H. Lang, who became the first official Harley-Davidson dealer. From 5 bikes sold in 1905 to 28,000 in 1920. That is one of the steepest growth curves in American manufacturing history. The company was officially incorporated on September 17, 1907, with 4 partners. Walter became president, and he earned it. In 1908, Walter personally entered the Federation of American Motorcyclists endurance run through the Catskill Mountains of New York, a grueling multi-day ride designed to test man and machine to the breaking point. He scored a perfect 1,000 points, beating every other rider in the field, and then followed it up by winning an economy run that proved the Harley got better fuel mileage than any other bike on the course. That is a perfect reliability score and the best gas mileage in the same weekend. It was Harley's first real publicity coup, and Walter did it by himself on a bike he built with his own hands. William Harley became chief engineer, and he made a sacrifice that says a lot about the man. He took less stock in the company than the Davidson brothers in exchange for cash to pay his tuition at the University of Wisconsin, where he went back to finish his mechanical engineering degree. Arthur became the sales guy, the hustler, the talker who would build the global dealer network from nothing. And big brother William A. became the factory manager who brought the rail shop discipline that turned a backyard project into an actual business. This is where the story takes a turn nobody expected, because for the first 20 years of its existence, Harley-Davidson was not the king of American motorcycles. They were the underdog. The king was a company called Indian. Indian Motorcycle was founded in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1901, 2 full years before Harley. By 1910, Indian was bigger, faster growing, and more successful in racing, producing roughly 4 times as many bikes. The myth that Harley dominated American motorcycling from the jump is exactly that, a myth. Then World War I changed everything. When America entered the war in April 1917, the military needed motorcycles. Indian made a decision that would eventually kill the company. They dedicated the vast majority of their production, roughly 50,000 motorcycles, to the war effort. Their civilian dealers were left with nothing to sell. Customers walked. Harley played it differently. They supplied about 20,000 military bikes, but they kept enough production capacity for civilian dealers to stay alive. Arthur Davidson spent the war years crisscrossing the country, quietly recruiting new dealers as Indian had abandoned theirs. By 1920, Harley-Davidson had become the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world. producing over 28,000 machines with dealers in 67 countries. The same company that was building its rivals' downfall was also trying to beat them on the racetrack. By 1914, Harley had formed an official factory race team. Within a few years, they were being called the Wrecking Crew. The roster reads like a Hall of Fame. Otto Walker became the first person to win a motorcycle race at over 100 miles per hour in 1921. Ray Weishar, known as the Kansas Cyclone, had a tradition of carrying a live piglet on victory laps. The press started calling Harley riders Hog Boys. Decades later, Harley would commercialize this with the Harley Owners Group, or HOG. And when Harley later tried to protect hog as a trademark, courts and trademark authorities ultimately treated it as generic slang for large motorcycles, which, looking back, was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid on Harley's part to try. The Wrecking Crew's story also has a dark side. Shrimp Burns died racing in Toledo in August 1921. Ray Weishar himself was killed in April 1924 when his bike went into a high-speed wobble at Legion Ascot Speedway in Los Angeles, and he went through a wooden fence. Ralph Hepburn died in qualifying at Indianapolis in 1948. In 1922, Arthur Davidson pulled the plug on the entire factory racing program, citing costs. One of the most famous racing teams in American motorcycle history was disbanded by accountants. If Harley had stopped here, this would be a very different story. But the 1929 crash was coming, and it nearly took everything with it. By 1933, Harley-Davidson's production had collapsed from roughly 21,000 bikes a year to just 3,703, an 82% drop. There was a Harley dealer in Fresno, California, who sold 0 motorcycles for the entire year of 1933. The entire experimental department was cut to 1 person. How did they survive when competitors like Excelsior Henderson folded in March 1931? 3 things, and none of them are particularly glamorous. First, they adapted their motorcycle engines to drive industrial machinery, basically keeping the factory running by making non-motorcycle products. Second, they introduced the Servicar in 1932, a 3-wheeled delivery vehicle that police departments, the Postal Service, and small businesses bought in steady numbers. That ugly little trike stayed in production until 1973. And third, Harley benefited from American Motorcycle Association racing rules that favored the kinds of heavyweight machines it built, which did not help Indian or what was left of Excelsior. There is also a foreign deal the company does not love talking about. In the mid-1930s, Harley licensed their designs to a Japanese company called Sankyo, which built the 74 cubic inch VL engine in Japan. After the relationship soured over licensing fees, Rikuo continued building Harley-derived machines, some of which ended up serving Japanese military customers. So yes, Harley-Davidson designs wound up on the other side of World War II. That detail does not appear in any Harley promotional material. The real engineering breakthrough that pulled Harley through the Depression came in 1936 with the EL Knucklehead engine. It was the company's first overhead valve motor with a recirculating oil system. It was faster, more reliable, and looked like nothing else on the road. The distinctive rocker covers on top of the cylinders looked like clenched fists, which is where the Knucklehead nickname came from. It was a genuine leap forward. It was also a mess at launch. Early models had valvetrain problems so bad that Harley had to redesign the system mid-year and retrofit bikes they had already sold. The engine that saved the company almost killed the company first. Indian held on through the Depression, but they were bleeding. They had wrecked their dealer network in World War I, scraped through the 1930s, and then lost the World War II contracting war. Harley delivered around 90,000 WLA military bikes. Indian managed around 40,000 of their Model 741. By the early 1950s, Indian was making bicycles, boat motors, and air conditioners on the side just to survive. In 1953, Indian folded. For the next 3 decades, Harley-Davidson was the only American motorcycle company. They had won, but not because they built better bikes. They won because they made smarter business decisions, and their competitors made fatal ones. Now, if you've been enjoying this deep dive into Harley's real history, hit subscribe. I cover stories like this every week, and the next chapter of this one is wild. So Harley was the last American motorcycle standing. But what happened over the July 4th weekend of 1947 in a California farming town called Hollister was about to change the company's identity forever. The American Motorcyclist Association's Gypsy Tour rolled into Hollister, a town of about 4,500 people with a 7-man police force. Roughly 4,000 riders showed up. The town had hosted these rallies before without incident. After the war, everything was different. Thousands of restless veterans, freshly addicted to the adrenaline of riding military motorcycles in combat zones, descended on a sleepy California farming town. Things got rowdy fast. Bikers drank in the streets, performed wheelies on front lawns, raced down Main Street, fought each other, urinated in public, and rode their motorcycles straight into bars. About 50 people were arrested, mostly for drunk and disorderly conduct. The local police chief reportedly called it just one hell of a mess. Nobody died. Nobody was seriously injured. By Sunday afternoon, most of the riders had left and the town went back to growing garlic. Then, on July 21, 1947, Life magazine published a photograph of a heavy-set, drunk-looking man on a Harley with beer bottles surrounding him. That photo has long been suspected of being staged by the photographer. The headline read, "Cyclist's Holiday," and described the riders as terrorizing the town. In a single-page spread, Life magazine invented the American biker outlaw and put him on a Harley-Davidson. The 1953 Marlon Brando film The Wild One finished the job. The Hells Angels Motorcycle Club was founded the following year, 1948, in Fontana, California. Many of the founding members were World War II veterans riding cheap surplus Harley WLA models. The club mandated American-made motorcycles, and since Indian was circling the drain, Harley was the only option. What developed was one of the strangest relationships in American business history. A Fortune 500 corporation effectively branded by an organization that law enforcement has long associated with organized crime activity. The Angels kept buying Harleys. Harley kept selling them. And the outlaw mystique became the brand's most valuable and most complicated marketing asset. The ironic detail is that the same company whose products were ridden by the Hells Angels also outfitted the cops chasing them. Arthur Davidson had made police departments core customers as early as 1908. By 1914, the United States Postal Service was operating nearly 5,000 Harleys. The Rebel brand spent its entire existence cashing checks from both sides. Up to this point, Harley had been in control. That was about to flip. In 1965, the founding families took the company public. By 1969, facing an invasion of Japanese manufacturers led by Honda and its revolutionary CB750, Harley-Davidson was acquired by American Machine and Foundry, better known as AMF. A conglomerate best known for bowling alley pin spotters, golf carts, and the anti-aircraft guns it had built for the Navy during World War II. To understand why this was such a disaster, you have to understand what Honda did. In the early 1960s, Honda ran a brilliant advertising campaign with the slogan, "You meet the nicest people on a Honda." It was designed to destroy the outlaw biker image and sell motorcycles to suburban families, college students, and women. It worked phenomenally. By the mid-1960s, Honda was selling hundreds of thousands of lightweight bikes in America. Then in 1969, they dropped the CB750, a 4-cylinder overhead cam disc brake superbike that cost less than a Harley and was faster, smoother, and more reliable. It was a gut punch, and Harley had nothing to answer it with. The most American motorcycle company in the world was now owned by a bowling equipment manufacturer headquartered in White Plains, New York. That's not a typo, by the way. AMF's strategy was classic conglomerate thinking. Increase volume, cut costs, ride the brand name. Production doubled. Quality went off a cliff. According to multiple accounts, a shocking share of bikes left the AMF-era assembly lines with defects or incomplete work. Oil leaks, electrical failures, loose bolts, inconsistent tolerances. Riders started calling the bikes Harley-Abelson and Harley-Davidson. The nicknames stuck for a generation. AMF moved final assembly to its York, Pennsylvania plant, which simultaneously produced rocket motor components, snowmobiles, golf carts, garden tractors, and bowling pin spotters. Harley motorcycles literally shared assembly capacity with bowling equipment, the market noticed. Harley's share of the U.S. heavyweight motorcycle market fell from near total dominance in the early 1970s to around 12.5% by 1983. Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Suzuki controlled over 3/4 of the American market. AMF wanted out. On June 16, 1981, a group of 13 senior Harley-Davidson executives, led by AMF Vice President Vaughn Beals Jr. and Chief Designer Willie G. Davidson, the grandson of co-founder William A. Davidson, put their personal finances on the line. With financing from Citicorp, they executed a leveraged buyout for $81.5 million and took Harley-Davidson private. The closing was held under a banner that reportedly read, "The Eagle Soars Alone." They built just 14 limited edition 1981 FXS lowriders to commemorate the deal, one for each buyer and one for a family member. Beals immediately cut the workforce by 40% and slashed salaries. He moved headquarters back to Milwaukee, and then things got worse. In 1984, Citicorp got nervous. The bank informed Beals it would no longer provide over-advance financing. Word spread. Other banks refused to step in. By October 1985, Beals and Chief Financial Officer Rich Tierlink were sitting across the table from the investment bank, Dean Witter Reynolds, reportedly preparing a Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing. Harley-Davidson, the last American motorcycle company, was reportedly hours from going under. At the last possible moment, an investment banker named Steve Deli at Dean Witter connected Beals with Heller Financial Corporation. Heller's second in command was a man named Bob Coe. Bob Coe happened to love Harley-Davidson motorcycles. Coe agreed to refinance the company with $49 million to buy out Citicorp's stake. Citicorp took an $18 million write-down and walked away. A motorcycle hobbyist banker saved the only American motorcycle company in existence. That's the kind of number that makes accountants cry. 8 months later, Deli pushed an even crazier idea. They took Harley public. Tierlink later admitted he thought it was insane. They did it anyway. In July 1986, Harley-Davidson went public on the American Stock Exchange. The initial public offering raised more than projected, and it finally gave the company room to breathe. Meanwhile, on April 1, 1983, President Ronald Reagan had signed a temporary tariff on imported heavyweight motorcycles with engines over 700 cubic centimeters. It started near 49% and was set to step down over 5 years. Everyone called it the Harley Tariff. Whether it actually worked is a whole other debate. Japanese manufacturers responded by tweaking engine displacements down to 699 cubic centimeters, just under the threshold, or by manufacturing inside the US at plants Honda and Kawasaki had already built in Ohio and Nebraska. Economists later argued the tariff explained only a fraction of Harley's recovery. In March 1987, Beals petitioned to end the tariff a year early, declaring victory. Reagan toured the York plant and told workers that American manufacturing could compete with anyone, anywhere, anytime. The real turnaround came from something less cinematic. Harley copied the Japanese. They adopted just-in-time inventory, which they rebranded materials as needed because calling it by its Japanese name would have been awkward. They implemented statistical process control and quality circles. Harley later claimed its defect rate fell from roughly 50% to about 1%. That's a self-reported number and should be taken with a grain of salt, but even skeptics agree quality improved dramatically. The genius of the post-buyout management, and you could call it cynicism depending on your perspective, was understanding that Harley-Davidson was no longer in the motorcycle business. They were in the identity business. In 1983, while still losing money, they launched the Harley Owners Group. HOG eventually grew to well over 1 million members worldwide. It turned customers into a paying volunteer marketing army. The product strategy explicitly stopped chasing Japanese performance. Instead, they leaned into the retro aesthetic. Bigger, louder, slower, heavier, more chrome. They repackaged it as heritage. The 1990 Fat Boy and the Softail line were aimed squarely at one customer type, the affluent baby boomer professional who wanted to feel like an outlaw on the weekends. By the late 1990s, the average age of a new Harley buyer had climbed into the late 40s. The price of a new touring bike pushed past $20,000. The company was selling licensed clothing, restaurant franchises, Christmas ornaments, and Barbie dolls. Willie G. Davidson, the grandson of co-founder William A., deserves more credit than he gets. As Harley's chief designer, he created the Super Glide, the low rider, the wide glide, and the fat boy. He showed up at rallies in jeans and a leather vest, beard hanging to his chest. He understood that Harley was selling a costume, not transportation, and he was the model. And here's an irony that nobody in the marketing department liked to talk about. While Reagan was at the York plant telling American workers they'd beaten the Japanese, Harley's sales in Japan rose 56% in 1987. Their biggest growth market during the Great American Comeback was Japan. Japanese consumers couldn't get enough of the big, loud, chrome-heavy bikes that represented everything their own manufacturers had moved away from. Harley-Davidson was saved by copying Japanese manufacturing, protected by tariffs against Japanese imports, and then turned around and sold a record number of bikes back to Japan. You can't make this stuff up. Before we wrap, there are a few more details the museum skips. In August 2016, the U.S. Department of Justice and the EPA announced a settlement with Harley-Davidson over Clean Air Act violations. The government alleged Harley had manufactured and sold roughly 340,000 Super Tuner aftermarket devices that overrode emissions controls, increasing hydrocarbon and nitrogen oxide pollution. They also alleged Harley sold over 12,000 motorcycles between 2006 and 2008 that were not properly certified for emissions compliance. The settlement cost Harley a $12 million civil penalty, plus $3 million for pollution mitigation. Harley called it a good faith compromise. Critics called it the motorcycle world's version of Dieselgate. The founders themselves did not get storybook endings. William A. Davidson died in 1937 at 66. Walter Davidson died in 1942 at 65, still serving as president. William Harley died in 1943 at 62 from heart failure. And Arthur Davidson, the last surviving founder, the hustler who built the dealer network from nothing, died on December 30th, 1950, in a two-car collision on Wisconsin Highway 59 near Waukesha. His wife Clara and their friends Donald and Dorothy Jeffrey were also killed. All four people in both cars died. 16 years later, Arthur's son James Davidson and his wife were also killed in an automobile accident. The Davidson family paid a staggering price for the name on those gas tanks. The corporate version of Harley-Davidson is a story about two friends in a shed who built the American dream. The real version is a story about a beekeeper uncle who loaned the startup money, a Norwegian engine designer the company barely mentions, a rail shop foreman who brought tools and skills from the railroad, the collapse of a smarter competitor, two wars that delivered federal contracts on a platter, a rowdy weekend in a California garlic town, 13 executives who bet everything, and a banker named Bob Coe who happened to love Harleys. The banner said, "The eagle soars alone," when they bought the company back from AMF. But the eagle never soared alone, not once. Every time it almost crashed, somebody else carried it. If this story surprised you, hit subscribe. I have more where this came from. If you want another deep dive into a brand that is not what it seems, check the video on screen right now. I will see you there.